Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the JBDC Virtual Biz Zone. Today is Tuesday, February 9, I believe, and I'm so happy to have you with us this morning. My name is Sansia Campbell, and I'm from the Corporate Communications Unit. This morning, I'm not going to talk for very long. I want to get right into the presentation because this morning's presentation is going to be rather interesting. We are going to be exploring the topic of risk management, validating and diversifying the supply chain. And we have a very special gentleman with us this morning. He is Mr. Kavin Hewitt from CIAL Dun and Bradstreet. And CIAL Dun and Bradstreet is an organization that JBDC recently signed an MOU with to help to develop the capacity of our micro and small business clients. And so he's here this morning to share with us on the topic, validating and diversifying the supply chain. And just to tell you a little bit about Mr. Hewitt, he previously led the Caribbean business operations of Mozido Inc. and drove the initiative leading to the region's first licensed mobile wallet in Jamaica, partnering with the Jamaica Cooperative Credit Union League. He also served as director of the Northern Caribbean region at Digicel. He's held senior positions at the National Commercial Bank and then went on to establish his own consultancy serving clients across the world. He's an accomplished expert in financial services, managing director and founder of Connect Payments and business consultant for CIAL Dun and Bradstreet Caribbean region, the English-speaking region that is. I'm going to hand over directly to Mr. Hewitt now for him to begin his presentation. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. And of course, as usual, we will facilitate question and answers following Mr. Hewitt's presentation. So it's over to you, Mr. Hewitt. We're looking forward to an exciting presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Santia, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, JBDC, for having me. Looking forward to sharing with this group, and just to give a little bit of background, you know, CIAL is really Spanish for the Americas, which includes Latin America and the Caribbean region. My role encompasses the English-speaking Caribbean region. So it's all territories with the exception of Haiti, Dom, Rep, and Cuba. So all the other territories fall under my jurisdiction. And I was really happy last year to ink a deal with JBDC to leverage CIAL Dun and Bradstreet's large database of clients and opportunities to bring to the fore, that's to the Jamaica small and medium enterprises, so that they can explore deep relationships with whether it's suppliers or clients across the world, and to leverage what some of the bigger businesses have been able to leverage successfully right across the globe. I'm gonna share my screen. So risk management, validating and diversifying the supply chain. In this era where all risk is at the top of everybody's mind. If you're running a business, whether or not you're running a business, it could be your family, it could be school. What this recent pandemic has taught us is preparedness for risk. Nobody saw this coming, and apparently not many people can speak to when it's going to be ending either. So the concept is, listen, we're living in a world now that is categorized by risk and how we manage it and how we live through it. And what I will attempt to do through this presentation is to look at, some options that you have in terms of tools to be able to manage your risk, especially as it relates to your supply chain. And I'm not sure how many businesses or persons on this call are in the manufacturing industry, but certainly those persons who are in production, manufacturing are deeply impacted. If the supply chain is impacted, then, we know that trickles all the way down to your productivity. So we're going to be delving a little bit into, how this works and how we can help you get through that. Now, just a little bit about CIAL Dun & Bradstreet. Dun & Bradstreet has been around for 178 years. That is more than twice the age of the oldest person who will be on this call. And we have over 320 million business records on file. We're used by many government agencies across the world, including the Food and Drug Administration of the United States of America, Custom Agency. We're used, we recently inked a deal in Brazil with the Brazilian government and to look at their supply chain and manage that and manage the risk around that. And of course, we have other Fortune 500s that have been involved, like the Walmart, the Dells, the Simons of this world, also Apple and USAID. Now, Dun & Bradstreet, this is the natural evolution, was formulated as a mercantile agency in 1841, and it changed its name to R.G. Dun & Company in 1859, and in 1933, it became Dun & Bradstreet. Thereafter, in 1963, the abbreviation DUNS number was introduced. I'm not sure how many business on this call may have a DUNS number, but this has become synonymous as a business identifier across the world. And we'll talk a little bit more about this further down in the presentation. We begin to look at SME packages. Now, in 2016, CIAL, which is a Latin American arm or partner for Dun & Bradstreet, was introduced, and the focus was narrowed for the Caribbean in 2020, with, of course, my joining Dun & Bradstreet as a business consultant to bring this opportunity to the Caribbean region. Now, as we begin to look at risk, there are four things that we can do with risk. We can reduce the risk by taking, mitigating activities. We can transfer the risk, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We can accept the risk, or we can practice risk avoidance. Now, if we look at this current COVID pandemic that is occurring, some elements of this risk, certainly we'll have to accept those things that are external to us, right? We have to accept that there's a pandemic, there's going to be impact on our business, there's going to be impact on the customers surrounding the business, going to be impact on the suppliers. But in accepting that risk, that's the macro risk, which is, of course, this designation by the WHO and other organizations, we can't change the designation as a pandemic. And what we have seen, even in the recent pronouncement by the Canadian Prime Minister, canceling travel to this region, that is something that we cannot change, but we have to accept. But at the same time, or we cannot avoid. There's going to be impact if you're looking to those markets, but how do we reduce this risk? So we're going to be looking at some of those risk reduction strategies or risk mitigation strategies, and how do we transfer this risk if that option is available. We're going to also be looking at a little bit on those risk transferring strategies as well. Now, as we begin to look at risk, we have to look at risk with the value chain in mind. On one end, we have our suppliers, and the other end, we have our customers, and that's us in the middle. And of course, risk is a possibility or likelihood that an event will occur that will have some elements of uncertainties. And even outside of the coronavirus, there are other risks that we have to deal with. And certainly in Jamaica, we have had to deal with a crime risk. And this region is no stranger to that element of risk, because as small as we are, most of our Caribbean states are ranked really high in terms of the crime risk and even the corruption index, we continue to look unfavorable on those indices as well. So we have to look at how are we going to manage risk in a region where we're normally categorized as high risk. The Latin American and Caribbean region is categorized as high risk. In the car division, for those persons who work close to financial services, you will know that when you're looking at this region, even as it relates to accepting cards, the rates that we pay is higher because of where we fall and the risk of criminality being higher. So, what MasterCard does in their risk transferring activities is to increase the price as a way of transferring that risk back to us. In the remittance industry as well, we have seen, and I speak specifically to Jamaica, we've had some problems there. We have seen how the criminality surrounding that industry has impacted and has called for enhanced due diligence and even suspension of agents. And, if that's not managed, service providers could even have their license suspended, as these remittance intermediaries across the world, the Western Unions, the MoneyGrams of this world, seek to mitigate their risk in the global market. Somebody is going to feel a pinch at the end of the day. So as these large corporates begin to look at their value chain, right, every business that is operating also have to look at its value chain. What are the risks associated with the suppliers? Are the suppliers compliant? Are they on any international watch lists? Because if you end up doing business with a supplier that is on an international watch list, certainly there can be sanctions that are very far-reaching for the business who would have been involved with that supplier. Or on the other end, even the customers who are major clients, right? What's their ability to pay? There's a credit risk. What's the power of the customer? Also, what's the power of the supplier? Are we diversifying sufficiently both sides of the value chain? Are we very dependent on 1, 2, 3 suppliers? What if these suppliers decide to double your price? What if these suppliers go out of business? What will be the business impact? And on the customer side, what if the customers can no longer pay for what we've supplied them? What kind of terms can you afford the customers in engaging with your business? What tools do you have to assess both sides, the supplier side and the customer side? Now, large organizations, of course, they have their procurement department that is fully staffed and have experts that are combing through various elements of risk management to ensure that the suppliers can continue to pay and can continue to supply, and the customers can continue to pay. For small organizations, it's difficult to employ a body of staff that's going to be focused solely on dealing with these risks. And these risk events in your value chain, if not managed properly, can wipe your business out pretty much overnight. And we can look at even the hotel industry. We've had quite a few hotels close its doors in the early onset of COVID because, of course, the entire industry came to a screeching halt. And the entire customer base was just cut off. Nobody wanted to travel. And we see the earnings, dip from a high in 2019 to negligible in 2020, and we also see that continuing. What does that mean for the suppliers to the hotel industry? For those who supply the hotel industry with, raw material, whether it's produce, meats, toiletries, they are impacted overnight as well. What strategies were in place to look at other markets, other clients might not be able to maintain the same amount of volume, but you must be able to continue business even at a lesser extent. Now, in terms of validating, check, verify, authenticate, prove accuracy from a credible source. We all have, and we, most of us go to the University of Google as well. And, whenever we need to search for something, we jump onto the internet and, we type something in Google and we start, researching. But how credible are the source? Anything that gets posted on the internet will find its way into Google. And bad actors know exactly how to use SEOs, that search engine optimization, to ensure that they get found first as well, right? And they'll bury, the bad action within their operation really deep. So you go in and their website's not being picked up on the initial search, but you are reliant on data. And the credibility of the source is extremely important. And you will see further down in our presentation how we are able to bring that credibility to bear so that you now have access to, be through JBDC or directly with CIAL D&B, the resources to be able to better manage risk and to manage your business, as well as to grow your business. Now, of course, the diversification of risk mitigation strategies, for those who would have done porters, we hear about the power of the supplier, the power of the customer, and we all know the way to reduce those powers is to have more options, or to have the means to have more options. We need to have a pipeline of suppliers. We need to have a pipeline of customers to be constantly retooling the business and to be constantly looking at existing relationship that the business has. Are your suppliers giving you the best service? Are they giving you the best value? You won't know until you look at the rest of the market or the rest of the world. And there are other risks, of course. There's the geographic risk, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Now, in looking at risk, we can look at those that, the macro risks, those things that are, external to us. And those are some of the risks that, listen, they're going to come at us irrespective of, however we're doing our business, the geopolitical risk and, the economic risks. And of course, and we would have done, most of you would have already been exposed to all the macro environment in business and all these things that can impact the technological, the political, right, the behavioral, all those comes into play. And we have to focus and look at how do we deal with those things? What are some of these risks that are affecting our business? Or what are some of these risks that our business may be impacted by? Now, I like to bring things into context using what we're currently experiencing. And there's economic, that's the financial risk that is impacting us and our customers and our suppliers in this current period, COVID period that we're going through, right? And these risks will impact our business because we will have less cash flow. So, when it's a flipping of the script, right? For we have suppliers and we have customers, right? And if we're supplying a customer to that customer, we are the supplier, of course. And they're also looking at us and you're asking the question, will the supplier continue to be able to make their obligation? What about credit terms? As you look at your mitigation strategy, if you have credit terms with your suppliers, maybe it's a good time to negotiate those credit terms. And, bearing in mind that, your suppliers are also looking at you as your customer, and they may be looking also to negotiate credit terms. My experience in the business, I've taught me that on the flip side, suppliers are looking, especially in this day and age, to reduce credit terms instead of increase credit terms in terms of number of days, weeks, months to pay, because they want to minimize their exposure. They want to minimize their receivables. And you have to also be thinking this way in terms of your own customer base that you would have given credit terms. Because the more exposed you are, should that client or customer that you're supplying go out of business, their ability to pay you is also going to be impacted. And that's just the cash flow around, the supply chain. Now, we start to look at the supplies itself. And what are we looking at? Tier 1, tier 2 supplies to or processes. We have to think ahead in terms of, especially where you have a very refined group of suppliers, we have to start thinking about what if these suppliers cannot supply key elements in our processes. So if we're manufacturing juices and there's a need for citric acid or sodium benzoate or one of those things that is used as a preservative for you to be able to continue doing what you're doing, but you only have 2 sources. And these sources may be getting tier 2 supplies from other sources as well in other geographies that may be impacted as exports are reduced, production is cut down, and people are focused on their market. Now, for those, and we see what happened last year in the United States with the Defense Act that was brought to bear. It restricted certain supplies to the United States. So if you're looking to the United States for certain supplies, even by this act being brought to bear, you can no longer access those supply and by the stroke of the pen. Do we have another geography that we can look to for these supplies? And I say it's important that you have geography diversification in your risk mitigation strategy as well, because you may find that you have multiple suppliers in one geography that may be impacted, whether it's by act of God, whether it's by war, whether it's by disease. Some geographies are impacted more than the others, right? And the timing of it, when do we start looking to increase that supply chain? Do we wait until the crisis is on our doors? Right? And then there's the other side of the supply chain, which is non-compliant suppliers. And they may not be compliant with, and not even from a money laundering or financing of terrorism perspective. They may be non-compliant with laws within their own country that can impact them. Are you looking at what's happening from a legal perspective with your suppliers? Are they being sued by any corporation? Are we checking adverse media about these suppliers on whether daily, weekly, monthly basis, just to ensure that our suppliers are healthy? All that is required is data and accessibility to it. And the more data and the more verified data and the more quality data you have access to, better it is to implement and manage your risk mitigation strategy. And that is where Dun & Bradstreet has built their business in terms of using data. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. We spoke about location and having multiple suppliers in key markets, transportation and logistics as well. I recall dealing with, it was late last year, it was a company in Guyana that was having significant problems with shipping because whilst their supplier had the supplies that they needed, they just could not get any freight to take it to them. And they had to look at alternative market for supplies. And it did create a significant impact because, of course, as you look at the other market, it means an increase in time, and it means establishing a new relationship, right? And we were able to help them to at least establish a relationship and for them to be able to identify a group of suppliers, and they were able to weather that storm, but it did cost them a month or two. So timing is also going to be very, very, very important. And then our customers, because at the end of the day, we're in business to serve our customers. That's how we make money. Now, what is it that we're supplying to our customers, right? If we're in the business of supplying office space, right, or even food, and I've looked at the market in Jamaica, those persons who provide lunch for businesses, even in the BPO sector, we have quite a few persons that lived off just providing food, feeding that BPO market with tens of thousands of persons. And on the onset of COVID, what happened? Persons were working from home. That demand disappeared overnight. And they had to retool the business. They had to scale down the business. And clearly the revenue from the business decreased dramatically. So, we have to be constantly looking at that as well. And one thing this pandemic has taught us is we have to be ready should something like this happen again. Now, in terms of internal, right, how are we tracking internally? Do we have an inventory management system? Are we tracking? And I'll share this. I was speaking with a gentleman. He's a fellow Jamaican, and he has an inventory management solution by the name of Cost Bucket, and it manages inventory all the way from the inwards from procurement all the way through to the sale. And I was asking him what has been his success in this market, and he says one of the greatest challenge has nothing to do with the software. It's just that people don't manage their inventory. They just don't see it as a very important matter. So if you don't know what product is moving, what product you have available, then it's going to impact how you manage your supplies, and it creates a risk as well. So this is not something that is created by a pandemic. It's just created by our own action. And for those of us who have businesses, whether it's a supermarket, whether it's anything that have stock that's on shelf, we have to think about inventory this way. Everything that is on the shelf is a pack of money, a stack of money. So if we should just replace everything that's on the shelves with their cash equivalent, and so if we had shelves filled with cash, just little packets of 5,000, 10,000, 2,000, 3,500, would we be cavalier in managing the inventory of cash as we are in managing the inventory of products? Maybe not. Maybe not. But it's food for thoughts, because sometimes you look at risk being the big thing that's external to us that impacts us that we have to deal with. But many times the risk is internal to us. It's just by the things that we're not doing, and we're not doing well. What about key processes? How are we managing, how are we monitoring key processes? And I spoke earlier to even credit adjudication and the credit adjudication process. I said, okay, fine. If we're looking and we do have customers and we have a credit policy, how are we managing it? Are we using technology? Are we using Excel spreadsheets? Do we have a system in place that we can access remotely? Do we have all the notations against a particular client in one central place where it can be viewed by people needing to make a final decision? The good thing is we don't have to go to spreadsheets. We don't have to go to logs and ledgers. There are technology out there. We certainly have technology that can assist in managing and automating your key processes, whether it's supplier qualification, whether it's credit management, whether it's compliance for those persons who, compliance is key to. We know, and I'm not sure what the audience is like in terms of, do we have persons in the financial sector, microlending, do we have persons? I'm not sure what the audience is like, but compliance is becoming more and more important, irrespective of industry. And why that is so. Recently, you would have heard about Jamaica's gray listing, and the central bank had to take significant corrective measures, because once we get tagged a particular way, it means that everything that we do is going to be a little bit more difficult. Funds that we raise is going to be a little bit more expensive, if we're able to raise them at all, because now we become a high-risk country in a high-risk region. What about our cash? Are we on top of our accounting processes? Are we managing our cash flow? And I'm certain JBDC has great policies in terms of helping entrepreneurs such as yourself, certainly the micro, medium, small enterprises, to be able to do these kind of accounting, just to ensure that at all times we have a clear understanding of what our cash flow look like, what our future cash flow looks like, what our receivables look like, what our day sales outstanding looks like, whether or not we'll be able to meet immediate and the future obligations, to be able to inform what kind of actions we need to take, right? What does our credit policy look like? Because a great credit policy brings about better credit decisions, which means you collect easier. And that is key. That is key. Now, just to go a little bit back to COVID, we did some analysis in the early days of the pandemic. And one of the things that we developed, we had a COVID-19 index report. And what it shows was the various industries that are impacted, right? And this was just coming out of the blocks. And it has not necessarily changed much, right? In terms of the graph. Yes, the figures would be impacted even more because of duration of time, but leisure and hospitality continue to take a beating. Healthcare, social assistance, professional and business services, retail, construction, manufacturing. So it's pretty much looking the same way, even though we are 1 year into this pandemic. So this is food for thought. And as we look right now, what we're getting is variants of the COVID-19 virus. So whilst, yes, there is some vaccine that's coming out, and we know the timeline for Jamaica, we're looking at April. And then by the time April comes, if I was in the Ministry of Health, of course, I would be talking about mitigating strategy, whether or not that vaccine that we're looking at for April, whether or not it's going to be a viable option in April with the variance that is likely going to be at the forefront of this fight. So it is going to be a tough economic environment to operate in. And as we know with the song, only the strong survive, you know, the companies that will survive are those who take corrective action, timely corrective action to deal with the immediate and the medium term. I'm not even talking long term right now because from a survival perspective, really and truly, we have to be looking at immediate, right, and short to medium term. Now, these are some of the questions that, you know, all the businesses have been asking themselves. How has my business been impacted? And we would have had 1 year of data to be able to look at that. How has the competition been impacted? Because we have to look across the fence as well, right? Am I doing better than my competitors? Can I use that? Are my competitors doing better than me? What are they doing that I'm not doing? How has the sector been impacted? Right? How has the sector been impacted in Jamaica? How has it been impacted, you know, in our neighbors, you know, whether it's Bahamas, Trinidad, Guyana, Cayman? We have to look a little bit further away from us and to get lessons learned. Is my business agile enough to monitor and adapt? Have I built that agility into my business? What about my suppliers? Are they being impacted to fulfill short-term orders or even medium-term orders? What about my customers? Have I seen any change in their behavior? Are good customers becoming bad? Can I be proactive instead of reactive as it relates to all of the above? Now, this is where we can help. And again, just if we track back to the initial slides, over 220 million entities in our records. And if we look at data points, we have much more data points on those 220 million than any other business in the world. So, you know, it's really an awesome thing when we're able to partner with JBDC to be able to bring these solutions to bear for its clients. We have a platform by the name of D&B Hoovers. Some of you may have come across it as you scour the web looking for you know, various businesses or clients. Sometimes you'll see something come across as a Hoover's web form. It is coming through our platform, D&B Hoovers, and it is one of the most used search engine of verified businesses in the world. It allows, of course, you to filter and to select so you can build your lead list of clients or your lead list of supplier in any geography that you're thinking of. Many of you on the call probably do business, probably import out of China. And, you know, I've spoken to so many businesses and they've had great stories and they've had some nightmare stories as well doing business there, right? Traveling to China is not the easiest thing, especially now. So accessibility to platform, accessibility to data through a platform such as Bradstreet that is trusted is a very good start. So in LATAM, we're looking at over 160 million database with over 1 million entities currently in the Latin American and Caribbean region, right? And you can filter, and there are many filters. You know, we can filter by business size, number of staff, annual revenue, right? We can filter by city, we can filter by country, just to get down to a workable list. And of course, you can bring that filter down by SIC, which is your industry code. You know, many times I'm speaking with businesses, you know, and, you know, giving them guidance, and they're looking for particular things on the web, just maybe a part, just maybe a set of parts or some raw material, and they need to find a business that can supply this set of raw material that is very important to their business. And you know, they may use Google, and they may get a list of many million entities. What we do is we flip the script so you can use our platform to filter these known entities. And then when you have a workable list, that's now when you do additional due diligence on that. And we'll show you how that works. All right, so we begin with 160 million entities. This is just a slice of life. Just giving you an example of how this would work. And these entities, of course, we have their records, and we track them in terms of, you know, what's happening in the news and industry reports. We track the court system as well, see if they have any adverse media, any court filing, any lawsuit. And once you have the list, we allow you to be able to export it. And you can also export the phone numbers, the contact details, addresses, etc. We have the ability where you can, you know, store this list, and this is talking about you managing your supply. You may also have suppliers that you can also search and save as a smart list in Hoovers. So if there's any change with that supplier, you get a notification. So if somebody issue a lawsuit, if one of their principal got blacklisted, you'd get an alert. And that is going from reactive to proactive. And that is one of the solutions we offer. Now, in terms of corporate structures, it's important also when you're engaging with a business to understand the family tree of that corporation. And we know there's a lot of business that have shell companies, and you know, because of our enormity and our size, we're able to see layers deeper than the man on the ground. So we are able to see if any of the principals within a particular corporation is engaged with other businesses that may have adverse media or adverse findings on them. And that is important as well, because it can have impact. As I say, ignorance is no excuse. We have over 175 filters, and JBDC has the Hoovers platform as well, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to assist you to build lists of your own and to work through the various filters to be able to provide a qualified listing for you to move on. And the important thing is we also can touch people who are not on our database, because we do have consultants and resources around the world that can investigate a company that is not even yet on our database. So this is how it works. So let's say after we've done the first filtering, we have 730 entities net. You know, you do your internet search, you disqualify 230, now have 500. You check the social and professional network, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and you're now down to 300 entities. You make some calls, you now have 100 entities that you're now looking at. You do some visits and you're now down to 30 entities, and this now is your short list. What do you do with these 30 entities in coming to your decision-making process? This is where we have enhanced due diligence. So we have a report that is called a business information report. And what that does, it gives a detailed breakdown of the entity, its financials, its principles, its risk portfolio, its credit rating. And this is important in the decision-making process. And if the entity is not in our database, we can still research it. There's this D&B rating that is used as a credit rating worldwide. And we'll talk a little bit about that when I get to the SME packages. We also look at the payment experience for the business in terms of the business information report. So we look at their suppliers as well to understand, just to get a deeper understanding of how these businesses pay, because that is also very important. And as I say, we look beyond the business itself. We look at what's happening in the news or the alerts. We look at their banks and their history, and certainly the corporate structure and the distribution of ownership. We look deeply into their operations as well and their financial information. So all that is contained in the business information report. And it is a tool that is used by a lot of corporations in Jamaica, certainly in Trinidad, more so in Latin America. I can tell you, the likes of a Samsung, they use the business information report to make decisions about your supply as well. Now, for those that want to create the relationship from the supplier side, we have a supplier qualifying report, right? So you could also feed this list into a software we have that looks at the supplier behavior more than the general business information. And it's available to a platform that we have that's called Supplier 360. And we also look at the compliance element of that business as well. When I say the compliance element, I'm meaning not just the business, but all its principals and senior executives within the business, just to ensure that they're compliant. So we're down to 10. So let's say we started 30, and after we've run it through these platforms, have a final list of 10. On the customer side, it works pretty much the same way. The difference is we use the business information report for the customer. So you're looking to see, okay, is this somebody that I should get into business with? Is it somebody that I can offer credit to? And the platform of choice that we offer is CIAL 360 for that. And again, compliance comes into the mix. And we're down to 10. So we could start with a list of pretty much over 1 million. And by applying various filters, we can have a final list as we look to grow our customer base or grow our supplier base, right? The whole idea is, and these are just numbers still, the whole idea is to get down to a manageable list. You say, okay, fine. I need to identify 5. I need to identify 10 more suppliers. I need to grow my customer base by 5 or 10. I need some serious customers to create some linkages. Might be in a different geography, might be even in Jamaica, right? And these are the tools that leverage the data that we have on these companies and the industry and the geography to be able to bring that forward and present to you. Now, for Compliance Watch, a lot of financial institution that deals with businesses that require compliance be a key activity. We do have a platform called Compliance Watch, and it looks at the reputational risks. It also looks for PEPs, and we have over 800 sanction lists that we monitor, and over 1.6 million PEPs that are listed on that list as well. We do have the largest database of executive and business owner profiles in the industry. And we do scan millions of articles on a daily basis for adverse media. So, remember I told you about the smart list? If you have a smart list in Hoovers and you have a particular entity that you found in Hoovers, if something happened with that entity, you would get a notification. It could be a news article, could be something in social media, could be a court ruling, but it would be brought to bear. So at least you now have the data to make the decision as to whether or not you need to start looking elsewhere. So what comes next? Now that you've narrowed down to 10, you get into signing the NDA. That is when now you start, to planning your visits if you have to, just to perform further due diligence, and you get into your pricing, and you get into the shipping details, and you start that negotiation around there. You sign your contract, and then you're off to doing business. Now, if you're looking to diversify your risk, when should you start? And this is a timeline of weeks. And we're saying that now is the time to start if you really want to build an honest and viable pipeline for additional suppliers, additional major clients. You want to give yourself 3 months, and this is why. You do your search, you narrow your search, you get additional information, whether it's through the business information report and the compliance or the supplier qualifying report, and then for the last 6 weeks, that is when you get into finalizing the arrangement with the narrowed list. So there's a need to act now to be able to be in a stronger position 3 months from now. Now, there's no science to say it's going to take 3 months. It may be shorter, it may be longer, based on the complexity of what it is that you're doing. Notwithstanding, the important thing is that you start now. So having gone through that, we have kind of been focused on searching how do you grow your database of suppliers, how do you grow your database of customers. But what about us? We're operating within the context of a global marketplace. So no longer is competition relegated to the shop next door or the business next door or the other local entity. We're now competing with other persons in the Caribbean. We're competing with companies in Mexico. We're competing with companies in the United States. They don't have to buy our products. Most of what we produce, maybe not the quality, maybe not the charm, but most of what we produce can be produced elsewhere. And this is where the SME packages are useful. And the agreement we have with JBDC, right, puts the SME, that's a small and medium enterprise package, on the forefront because it's a very important first step and to establishing a business locally, regionally, and globally. And that is how businesses get into our database. And the more information we have on your business, is the easier it will be for customers who are seeking to do business with you to find you. Right? So if they're looking at a particular geography and we have the information on you, you will come up. And as I say, the agreement that we signed with JBDC, it packages all of that for you JBDC clients to start. So I like to think of the SME package as a start because all small and medium-sized business owners face a challenge. How do I position my brand locally and internationally? If you're not been around and if you're not well known, how can I show prospects that I'm a reliable partner? And you may be well known in Jamaica, you may be well known in the region, but there are partners and there are clients that could be looking for you anywhere in the world. It could be in Europe, could be in Asia, in the Americas, could be looking for what it is that you're doing, but they can't find you. They won't find you in Google easily, unless, of course, they're probably going to go through 1,000 pages. But this is a way with filters that they can find you. And this is a way that you can find them. And if you find them and you are listed, then they also know that you would have been vetted by Dun & Bradstreet. So they'll know that you are a credible business. So the value proposition, of course, is giving you an identity through your DUNS number, which is a global business identity. designation, so you become more visible, and of course, establishing and increasing your credibility. Again, when we're operating in a high-risk environment as ours, credibility is extremely important. We have to ensure that we give ourselves the best opportunity to succeed. And this is one of the tools that you can easily use as a start to get out of the blocks. So what comes with the package? You do get your DUNS number, right? And as I said, it's a business ID. So every verified business in D&B database in the world, a company with a DUNS number, of course, will be able to qualify easier for contracts and loans. So you now have an accurate, you've now put out to the world an accurate story of what you do. It's also required, by the way, by a lot of agencies across the world, including the FDA. So you may be looking to do some export and you hear you need a DUNS number. Now you can get a DUNS number without an SME package, but what that does, and I like to make this differentiation, it's like having your number in the white pages of the telephone directory and not having it online. So that is what it equates to. Now you get a DUNS registered profile. So you get a digital badge, right, which is linked into our international network. And of course, you can display that digital badge on your website. So if somebody lands on your website and they see the Dun & Bradstreet DUNS registered digital badge, they click on it, they will have that authentication. So it's like a verified by Visa for businesses. We'll also do a business information report on your company. And that is essential, especially if you're looking to engage with a supplier, if you're looking to tender or to respond to whether it's an RFP or an RFI, in which BIR, right, it substantiates as a detailed enough business and the credit report that it can get you into the game. And you get access to PowerLinks. Now, PowerLinks is a platform that uses artificial intelligence to match like businesses or like interests across the world. So we do have a cadre of investors that go to PowerLinks that's looking for businesses to invest in. And also, you know, we do have suppliers, we do have customers that goes to PowerLink to create those linkages. So you get, of course, with your subscription, you get access to PowerLinks. And last, but certainly not least, you do get a credibility certificate, which is a virtual certificate that you can print or you can submit with beta RFP, RFI that says to whoever it is that's evaluating you that you have been deemed credible by Dun & Bradstreet. Now, of course, we issue credibility certificate only after we have done our checks and balances on a business. So let me put that disclaimer in. So I've been talking for an hour. I'm sure there must be a bunch of questions, so I will break here for questions. I'll turn over to the moderator, Sansia, to facilitate.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hewitt. That was indeed a comprehensive presentation.
You're most welcome, Sansia.
You highlighted some very important factors in business that I'm sure that not a lot of persons have thought about. As Mr. Hewitt said, we are now open to question and answers. But just to get the ball rolling, I was making some notes while you were doing your presentation and looking back at the risk as it relates to business. I'm wondering if there's anything, even though you highlighted some elements of risk that some of the companies are now facing, is there anything that the hotels or airline industry could have done differently to have a different outcome than what we have right now? In terms of COVID, that is.
In terms of COVID, absolutely. for a long time, and in my other life as a consultant, I've had conversations with hoteliers, not just in Jamaica, but elsewhere, and just looking at their mitigation strategies and the reliance, the very heavy reliance on particular markets. Whilst these are feeder markets, it creates a risk, because then if your supplier is the United States or Canada and that market gets shut off, then a significant part of your revenue is impacted. So in a hotel industry, of course, you're talking about a couple of things. There's the supply of customers coming in from these markets, and also the raw material that is required to take care of all of these customers, right? How much do they engage in that? Are they looking at their import ratios to what they get locally, right? Is there a balance? If a market is shut off, do you have strong alternatives locally to be able to supply? And even outside of COVID, these are things that hoteliers need to really start doing. And to agencies such as the JBDC, right, is to engage, and there's a grand opportunity to engage your clients as well, small and medium enterprises, to create these linkages.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Or we have a tourism linkages group, kind of, in, well, what's it called? I know it's tourism linkages. I'm not remembering the last word right now. But there is a group, a coalition of persons that are, in terms of the hotels, the craft industry, all of those persons who come together to form the tourism linkages industry. But I mean, like you said, we just never saw this coming. And
yeah.
I know that not only are the hotels suffering from it. There was earlier in the pandemic, when it just hit, I remember seeing on the news this chicken farmer who lost, almost £1 million of chicken because there was just no one to buy it.
Yes.
And for me, that tourism linkages hub. Thank you so much, Charlie. My mind was blown when I heard about him losing all of this chicken because there was no market for it. And I'm like, weren't there any plans for like a local market? What would you, what don't you have? I know that maybe Jamaicans can't eat off £1 million of chicken, but wasn't there something happening in the local market that you could have supplied? I don't know,
and you're so right. You're so right. You're so right. And I'll tell you, that farmer, what happened is this: the power of the supplier and dependency on one supplier, one customer. So he's supplying this major customer, and it's been that way for years. But this customer also has a significant amount of power over this supplier, because they can drive the price down, because they know you have to depend on them with that supply. Now, we're really focused on, and I see a lot of the business here really focused on the local market and the United States as a market, right? One of the things, and in my engaging with CIAL to come into the English-speaking Caribbean and to open up these opportunities, was to open up the rest of LATAM, right? There's Mexico, there's Brazil, and there's a significant amount of things, right? I say, Haja e Mexico, you're made in Mexico. There's an opportunity for us to create linkages with Mexico. And Mexico, we do not need a visa to go to Mexico.
Right.
Right.
And, there are so many conversations that could spin out of this. I'm not cutting or anything, but I'm also thinking about even though we recognize that even as it relates to COVID, most of the world is going back into lockdown because of the new variants of COVID that are emerging right now. What else can we focus on instead of still looking to a tourism product, as it were, in Jamaica? And I think that is where the conversation needs to go. I might sound insensitive. A lot of people might say, "Oh, you know nothing." The reality is, I worked in the tourism industry for a long, long time. It is near and dear to my heart. But the reality is that right now, there really is not an industry. What else can we look at? You know,
and we have to. Is either, as I say, we can't avoid what is happening with COVID, right? Clearly, you may have to scale down, but there is a local tourist. And I see hotels now building strategies around local that weren't really very robust before. And this is a conversation I've had with a lot of hotel leaders as well, saying, listen, yes, I understand. We all want the US dollars and it's all good. It's all great. But what about your local market? Right? What about, and a hotel that has done well with the local market is the Rio Group has done well in terms of targeting the local market. They have done well with that, right? But then you have the large hotels, and then you have the boutique hotels, and then you have the villas and the Airbnb type. And there's a lot of energy and focus that can be generated around local and build that industry. The hotels clearly create a huge import bill, right, for the country, and we really need to start looking at, even after things come back to some semblance of normality, how do we structure a business? Are we being self-reliant? Are we creating opportunities for local industries to grow? Are local industries creating opportunities for themselves, right? And again, if some of the questions asked, what is our competitors doing? And our competitors does not necessarily mean the shop next door. Right? Why is it that the hotel is importing lettuce from the United States, even though every now and then you hear about E. coli, this and all of salmonella and all of these things? What's wrong with our local produce?
Like
right?
Last
and if you
night, I saw on the news the farmers eating the tomato and feeding it to the pigs and all of that because nobody is buying it. What happened to us? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's it. So this platform, it's not just look at what's happening, in Jamaica. We do have neighbors. The Bahamas import everything.
Yeah.
Right? They grow nothing there. Right? And a lot of our Caribbean neighbors do not have the luxury of land and stuff that we have.
Right.
Are we actively looking at these markets? Are we creating the linkages? And that's one of the reasons why I brought this into the Caribbean, because I saw the need to start creating these linkages within the region, right? So we can start to do business with each other.
Exactly.
Right. So there's a large market that is being ignored.
Yeah, and that is the local market. Right. So moving to another point in your presentation, you spoke about agility. How do businesses improve their agility in the current market?
Well, and that's key. Yeah, and if you go back to the slide, if you can remember the slide, I said, when do you start? You have to start, you have to put a peg in the ground and you start now. How do you become agile as a business? You have to look at your customer base. You have to look at your supplier base, right? You have to look at what you have. You have to look internal, you have to look external. And because if you're using technology, you're not using the human resource so much, you can start that process now. You can start looking at your supplier base and say, okay, fine. With the downturn in the economy, can I get my supplies cheaper? Have I even been looking? How do I position myself? So when I'm having a conversation with a supplier, I can say, hey, it's one thing to say, listen, I operate in Jamaica. That supplier is going to say, okay, Jamaica, or Jamaica, high-risk Jamaica. And unfortunately, the headlines that sometimes make it overseas are not necessarily the pleasant ones.
The best ones, yes.
Right? Right. So we can say, hey, listen, yes, I operate within Jamaica. I'm registered and done on Bradstreet, XYZ. It changes the complexion somewhat.
Yeah.
So it moves the rhetoric from I wonder if this is even a legit. That's even, you probably call somebody and it comes scam likely on their phone overseas.
Yeah.
Just the 876 triggers a scam likely response because the mobile network operators, they're putting in risk mitigation strategies for their customer too. So they're flagging high risk countries as scam likely to put their customers on guard. So you just imagine your business and you call a supplier, it comes up scam likely, notwithstanding to say, they answer. In the back of their mind, you're starting off on a bad foot. How do you now prove yourself that you're legitimate? What is available locally? Because that's one of the things. Yes, we do have a credit bureau and stuff, but there's nothing that the credit bureau can give you that you can take to an overseas supplier to say, hey, here it is. It's not going to be recognized. Right. And I get that from a lot of the manufacturers in Trinidad, Guyana that is up and coming. They'll be knocking on the doors, asking to be listed on this platform because as they engage, people are asking them, how do I know that you're legit?
So what kind of plan does CIAL have in terms of first of all, making your platform more accessible, particularly to the S in the SMEs? Because the M's might know about you, but the S's are a lot. They're a lot more, and they're a lot less likely to be aware of this kind of platform being available. So what is CIAL's plan to get the S's involved in particular?
Well, one of our plans, of course, is engaging with entities such as yourself, right? Because you have a relationship with the S's. We do have a relationship with Jam Pro as well, right? Which is another entity that do some hand-holding with the S's, right? And we do have a relationship with JMEA. And so we're looking at umbrella organizations. So, we're looking for that touch point that can give us the umbrella effect so we can reach more persons, with less work, and we engage, and that's why we have the SME product. What we have to recognize, and I'll say this, and I'll say it out loud, is as a business, we have to recognize that we have to make a conscious investment in the business. And yes, I know that the SME, costs $950 US, and for some businesses here, that might be a big chunk, right? But what does it give you? What opportunities does it provide? It's a plugin, right? Do we advertise and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars advertising? Or do we invest in something that put us on a global front and allow us to be seen, give us the tools to be able to respond to an RFP or an RFI, or to even write a proposal and put in it that, listen, this is your registered or Dun & Bradstreet, put your seal in it so they recognize that, listen, you've had an international agency do their homework on you and you're ready for business. It requires that kind of investment. It might be the equivalent of a middle manager's pay for the month or a supervisor's pay for the month, but it's an investment that continues to pay for the duration of the business,
Okay.
So, but just to share, I have had, and I'm encouraged. We do have a couple of companies in Jamaica that have taken it on, and I've gone on, of course, to use our compliance programs, and the Hoovers, certainly the Hoovers. A lot of companies have used the Hoovers to be able to do their detailed search and filtering, and it is key. But it's just to make that investment to get this thing started, to get your business out there, right? And you'll also learn when the business information report is done, you'll also learn from the report how you'd be viewed by an international agency and where you need to strengthen. So it's not just, oh, you have a report. It's a report that can also inform you on what you need to be doing differently to strengthen your score if your score needs to be strengthened.
So it's like a credit rating system for the business then?
Yes, it does have a credit score in it, but it's much more than a credit rating, right? It looks at all aspects of the business operations and so forth, right? It looks at its ownership as well and its compliance.
So you outlined some packages. What are the costs associated with using your packages?
Yes. And for the purpose of this call, right, the SME package, as I said, I've put forward is $950, right? The compliance and the business information report tools, as well as the supplier qualifying tools, right? Those are sold in terms of units, right? And it's dependent on which company and where they're located, that you'll want to do a business information report on. But we do have packages that range, from a low of 1,000, and it can become, a much bigger figure depending on the size of the organization. But I'd say an investment of, $1,500 could give any company sufficient tools to be able to assess, maybe a dozen entities, right, after they've narrowed those entities, and to be able to fine tune and to engage. And this we talk about risk mitigation and being proactive. This is being proactive. Right. We have to start looking outside of what is right in front of us and begin to create those linkages within CARICOM. Let's just look at our Latin American partners who are also looking to us. They're looking to us to do stuff as well, right? We do have a good brand as Jamaica, yes, right? And it's a well-known brand. Yeah, despite the challenges, it's a good brand. Yeah. But we have to just become much more organized and look more international in terms of how we present ourselves on the market as a brand. And this, by leveraging a platform such as Dun & Bradstreet, helps local businesses look like a big, well-organized, like a big deal. yeah, absolutely, and that's important. I always say the optics it's really very important.
Very important. I think we'll probably need to train some of our business people in the concept of optics.
Yes. You
have to look the part for persons.
Absolutely.
You are who you say you are.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that you are really looking to work with umbrella organizations so that you can get in contact with the small entrepreneurs. But who are some of the other clients that you have worked with, particularly locally, since you started since the organization came to Jamaica?
Well, locally, I've done a lot of work with financial institutions. I've worked with companies in distribution, also in manufacturing, particularly those who are looking for export. I find those companies that are rating themselves for the export market, whether into the United States, into the Caribbean, into Latin America, have found great. They literally have knocked on my door. And for companies also that's looking for suppliers out of China or in Asia, whether it's India, China, or elsewhere in Europe, Australia, or LATAM, have found favor in our services as well, being able to identify these companies and to create the linkages, right? So I've done a lot of work with companies that are looking that direction as well, right? And people in, as I said, distribution, people in the automobile spare part industry, because they tend to have a need for continuous, they have a continuous appetite for suppliers, right? And by giving themselves a cadre of suppliers, they are able to get the better rates, and better rates mean better profit, or hopefully better prices for their customers as well.
Yeah. My last question, and I hope some of our participants will want to jump in here with some questions. So you can feel free to drop it in the chat if you don't want to raise your hand. I noticed that you mentioned quite a lot about researching your suppliers before engaging with them, and you mentioned even looking at their legal situation. Why is that important?
It's important for many reasons, right? You don't know who is on an international sanction list, right? And you may find out late. You may find out after you start transferring money, and then you hear that you're facilitating, international terrorist funding. And, once you don't want to get your business or your name tainted by engaging in business or with people or companies who one or more of their principals are on a blacklist.
Right.
So it may seem like a simple thing, but it's a very important thing because, if your name make a sanction list because of who you're doing business with, it's really difficult to get off that list.
Right. Okay. I understand the perspective from which you're coming. I just wanted to understand because I know that sometimes when you undertake this kind of research especially as a small business, it can be quite not only time consuming but also cost consuming. And so we want to ensure that the investment is being done for the right reasons.
Absolutely.
Right. So we're open for questions. Anybody have any question, they can go ahead and either raise their hand or drop it in the chat. I'm sure we have a few minutes, so Mr. Hewitt would be more than happy to take some of your questions. I'm not seeing any movement in the chat. Right. Well, since there is no movement in the chat, Kavin Hewitt, I want to thank you so much on behalf of JBDC for coming and sharing with us this invaluable information this morning. I mean, I learned a lot, and I also learned a lot from the conversation that we had post your presentation. As a reminder for persons, we will be posting this presentation on the JBDC YouTube channel. It's at JBDC Jamaica. So you can feel free to subscribe to us on YouTube, and you will be able to be notified when the presentation is up. You have posted your contact?
Yeah, I'll post my contact. I'm wondering if I've posted to all. Let me see. Post it to everyone. Well, let me post it. I'm gonna just drop my contact into the chat. So, I know sometimes we tend to be a little bit reserved in asking questions, but feel free. That's my contact, 876-844-8569. Feel free to, drop me a text, call me if there's a question that you have that, you want to ask. Again, as I said, we do have an arrangement with JBDC to facilitate clearly the onboarding to the SME package that I've told you about, and which is a very good entry point in terms of building your profile for local, regional, and international trade. So, feel free and, message me or call me.
You could also post the resource information in terms of any website that they can access for the information in the chat too as well with the SME packages. That would be great.
Absolutely.
Yes. And while you're doing that, I just want to remind everyone that the JBDC offices remain open. We suggest, however, that you give us a call, 876-928-5161, goes up to 5, just to make an appointment to ensure that we are remaining safe. The numbers are again rising with COVID in Jamaica, so we have to keep you safe and keep our team members safe as well. Feel free to also send us an email at info@jbdc.net, and we will direct the information to the correct person so that they can contact you with the information that you require. So thank you again, Kavin, for having joined us, and thank you to everyone for joining us as well. Remember, we have another session at 1 o'clock today, so feel free to join us, and have a great day, everybody.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Have a great day. Okay.